Welcome to the explainer. So picture this. You're right in the middle of a conversation and suddenly you feel a shift. A tiny micro-expression flickers across someone's face. A word is chosen just a little too carefully, or maybe a silence hangs in the air for just half a second too long. You catch it. You notice it instantly. But then you look around and you realize literally nobody else did. And for a split second, you're sitting there feeling totally isolated, genuinely wondering, wait, did I just make that whole thing up? Well, if you're nodding along right now, I have to tell you something absolutely crucial. You are not imagining things. You're not just overthinking. And you for sure didn't invent this feeling just to feel special. There is actually a deeply researched biological reason why your brain operates this way. And today, we are going to unpack exactly what is going on in your mind. Let's dive right in. You know, it's those hyper-specific, fleeting moments that can make you feel so incredibly disconnected. When you pick up on these tiny cues and no one else does, the immediate knee-jerk reaction is self-doubt, right? You think, man, am I reading way too much into this? But what if the answer is that you're just seeing exactly what's really there while everyone else is just missing it? To understand why, we need to look at the mechanics of the mind. This brings us to section 1, the brain's bouncer, filtering the world. So every single human brain is constantly filtering the world around it. Right now, as we speak, there are hundreds of little details in your environment that your brain has automatically decided just aren't worth your attention. It's kind of like a bouncer at the door of an exclusive club, right? Deciding exactly what gets in and what stays out on the street. In psychology, the technical term for this filtering process is latent inhibition. And look, for most people, this filter is highly efficient. It quickly and automatically blocks out all that background noise so they can just get a good enough picture of what's going on and move on with their day without getting completely overwhelmed. Now, when someone has high latent inhibition, the hum of an air conditioner, a slight shift in someone's posture, or a weird little tone in a voice, it's gone, filed away as irrelevant background noise before they even consciously register it. But a brain with low latent inhibition, totally different story. The bouncer is essentially letting everything in. All those extra signals, the subtle details, the random pieces of information, they all rush right through the front door. And honestly, on its own, just letting everything in would be incredibly overwhelming. So what exactly is the difference between being utterly overwhelmed and actually processing all this information? Let's look at section 2, sensory processing sensitivity, the science of feeling more. Back in the 1990s, psychologist Elaine Aron identified this specific trait, and get this, it is incredibly common. We're talking about 15 to 20% of the population. Up to a fifth of people operate exactly like this. To put that into perspective, that's literally millions of people. And the absolute most crucial point here is that this is not about being fragile or too emotional, which, let's be real, is unfortunately how it's usually dismissed. At its core, it's really just about processing things more deeply. It's about taking in more data, sitting with it a bit longer, and picking up on patterns that everybody else just blew right past. Aron's research actually points out that this deep processing isn't a bug in your mental software, it's a feature. It's a hardwired evolutionary trait found in over 100 different species. It functions basically as a stop and look before you act strategy. The brain prioritizes taking in the absolute maximum amount of data and analyzing deep patterns before making a move. So yeah, it's a pretty incredible survival mechanism when you think about it. To really cement how differently these brains filter the world, we have to look at one of the most famous psychological experiments ever. Section 3, the invisible gorilla, a lesson in focus. Okay, let me walk you through the exact setup of this classic 1999 study. Participants were given a super specific task. Step 1, watch a video of people passing a basketball. Step 2, count the exact number of passes made by the team wearing white. Sounds easy, right? But here is the trick. During step 3, a person in a literal full-body gorilla suit walks right through the middle of the game. And you know what happened? About half the people completely missed the gorilla. No way, right? But it wasn't because they weren't paying attention. It was because they were paying so much attention to counting those passes. Their brain locked onto the task, actively blocked out the gorilla as not relevant, and basically rendered it completely invisible. In psychology, we call this inattentional blindness. But let's think about how this plays out for someone with a highly perceptive brain, someone with that lower latent inhibition we talked about. If you have this trait, your experience of that exact same video is wildly different. You count the passes, and you see the gorilla. Not only that,
you probably notice that one of the players looks a bit tense, and maybe something about the overall vibe of the room just feels off. Same video, entirely different reality. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that sounds like an absolute superpower. But let's look at the flip side. Section 4, the exhaustion of empathy, the hidden toll. Because seeing absolutely everything, it doesn't always feel like a gift. A highly perceptive brain is basically constantly tracking invisible data points. While everyone else is just, passively following the words in a conversation, you are out there tracking vocal tone, conversational timing, micro body language, and that weird unspoken tension between two people standing across the room. Actually, brain imaging studies show that people with this trait have noticeably stronger activity in regions tied to awareness, empathy, and processing other people's emotions. Your brain is literally working overtime. So, when you feel completely wiped out after a seemingly normal social interaction, you are not making excuses. The real truth is, your brain isn't tripping up. It's just multitasking a lot. Like, a lot. It is processing all the unspoken tension that everyone else completely misses. So of course you're exhausted. It's not a weakness, it's pure biology. And that brings us to a major emotional cost of operating this way in a world that consistently ignores what you see. Section 5, the second guessing trap. Think about it. When you spend years sensing that something is wrong weeks before anyone else does, or you say something that feels so obvious to you, but it lands like it came completely out of left field, well, it takes a toll. Consistently noticing things that others wave off practically trains you to quietly question yourself. You hesitate, you hold back. You learn the hard way that accuracy doesn't always translate to recognition. So slowly, without anyone ever actually telling you to do it, you start trusting yourself less. It's a learned response. And this creates a really fascinating paradox. You might be the exact kind of person who can walk into a crowded room and read the group dynamics effortlessly. But when a situation becomes deeply personal to you, you completely freeze up. Why does that happen? Because proximity makes it so much harder to see clearly. When you combine that personal closeness with years and years of second-guessing your own incredibly accurate radar, hesitation just completely takes over. So how do we fix this? How do we break out of this exhausting overthinking loop? Let's move to Section 6, turning perception into clarity. The absolute core thesis of this entire explainer is this: perception is neutral. It becomes either useful or exhausting, entirely depending on the context. Having this hyper-awareness, this sensory processing sensitivity, it is neither inherently good nor inherently bad. The issue is literally never your radar or your signals. The real issue is whether you have the context, the trust, and the proper framework to use it. Because without a structural framework to process all this incoming data, that intense awareness turns inward, almost like a tornado. It becomes this looping cycle of overthinking, doubt, and hesitation. But with structure, it transforms into an anchor. It becomes total clarity. It becomes a super reliable day-to-day tool where you have a stable ability to actually trust what you see without getting trapped inside your own head. You go from feeling totally overwhelmed by the room to calmly understanding it. It is officially time to stop doubting your incredibly capable, totally unique mind. You weren't imagining things, and you certainly aren't being too much. You are just noticing things that are really, truly there. So, I'm going to leave you with this. Will you keep second-guessing the gorilla you so clearly see, or will you finally start trusting your own signals? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.